All right, it's 1:02. I think we can get started. All right, welcome everyone to our webinar, Harnessing AI in Salesforce, the Role of Clean Data. I'm Adam Cuoco, your moderator for today's session. We're excited to have you join us as we explore the powerful intersection of AI and clean data within the Salesforce ecosystem. As many of you know, the effectiveness of AI initiatives relies heavily on the quality of data. Wendy Batchelder, the Chief Data Officer at Salesforce, said, and I quote, "The AI revolution is actually a data revolution, and the company's AI strategy is only as strong as its data strategy, with trust at its core," end quote. Which, as a marketer that lives in Salesforce, I'm reminded every day how important data quality and keeping the database as clean as possible is. In this session, we'll discuss best practices for ensuring data integrity, the impact of clean data on AI-driven insights, especially in the Salesforce ecosystem, and how clean data can streamline these processes. Our expert panel is here to share their insights, strategies, and real-world examples with you today. Whether you're a seasoned Salesforce user, admin, a data enthusiast, or just curious about the possibilities AI brings, there's something here for everyone. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we start. This webinar will run for about 45 minutes, unless we go over due to questions from the attendees. This webinar will be recorded, and we'll take out the Q&A session from the recording. We'll send out the recording to all the attendees here so you can watch this again or share it with friends and colleagues. If you have any questions during the webinar, please don't hesitate to ask. Our speakers, Dr. Shannon Gregg and Calvin O, are here to provide valuable insights and clarify any concepts you'd like to explore further. Feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box, as Shannon mentioned, and we'll address them during the Q&A session towards the end. So without further ado, we'll dive into today's discussion and unlock the potential of clean data and harnessing AI for Salesforce success. I'll start by introducing today's speakers. Dr. Shannon Gregg has a PhD in community engagement and an MBA from Point Park University. She's recognized as an expert in sales technology and a pioneer in adopting and influencing systems like Salesforce. As the president of Cloud Adoption Solutions, she offers consulting, keynote talks, and workshops on sales optimization, and her book, It's About Time, is used widely by sales teams to drive results, as she also teaches professional selling at Point Park University. In 2020, she was recognized as the top influential woman in technology, so it's a real pleasure to have her here today. It's also a great pleasure to have Calvin O on our panel today. He's an ISV technical advisor at Salesforce for over 5 years. He's a certified Salesforce solutions admin, architect, developer, as well as a software engineer with hands-on experience in developing and integrating solutions for a variety of products and languages. And with that said, I'll hand it over to Calvin to introduce the topics and the agenda for today.
All right, thank you, Adam. So today's presentation, we're going to talk about a bunch of things, right? I think the biggest key takeaway of today's presentation is to help you understand where the role of AI will be playing and the role of clean data that will influence those decisions and the outcomes of those artificial intelligence models. First, we're going to start off by understanding the problem. What is data quality as a whole? Then we're going to talk about a bit of solution overview, talk about what you can do with clean data. And then we're going to talk about some real-world applications and best practices. And then finally, we're going to wrap things up with how Data Groomer can help. And we're going to see how that can all tie in together through a live demo. And then finally, we're going to close off this presentation with a quick Q&A and a wrap-up. Off to you, Shannon.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be speaking to everybody here today about what is probably the biggest Achilles heel in nearly every single Salesforce instance, and that is clean data. So clean data is a challenge for everybody because it's something that has to be constantly watered and fed. But as we're leaning into clean data, one of the reasons why you're most likely to want to do this right now is you want to use AI. You want to take advantage of that artificial intelligence that is being promised by Salesforce and any other point solutions that you have inside of your Salesforce instance. And I'm joining you today to tell you a little bit about how you can use best practices from research into reality. And 3 main things that I want to tell you about are you've got to make sure that you've got key AI readiness. You want to make sure that you have an AI strategy, and you want to really be thoughtful about your entire organization, the people in your organization, and how they can reskill for AI. They want to do AI. People are concerned about AI. They're excited about AI. They're nervous about AI. It's become a sort of buzzword that they know they need to understand more about. And those three key things are going to be really critical because your outcomes for AI depend on making sure the organization is ready for it. Why do you want to take advantage of that? One, we know clean data really enhances AI outcomes in Salesforce. If you've read anything about the way that AI processors take up so much energy, your Salesforce instance works in the same way. So if you've got dirt in the corners of your room, it's going to be really challenging for you to make sure that you're optimizing what AI can provide you inside of your instance. And AI will be leveraged more effectively once you know that you've got clean data. This is something that you'll see you have to pay attention to all the time. You don't just do data one time and make sure it's clean and things will carry on from there. Calvin's going to tell you more about that in a few minutes, and I think you're going to be really excited about some of the extreme experience that he brings to making sure you've got serious data hygiene to make sure that you're taking advantage of what AI can offer you in your Salesforce instance. We'll go to the next slide. And while we're on this next slide, I want to talk to you a little bit about AI readiness. Now, you've already heard from Adam that I did do my doctoral research on Salesforce user adoption. And some of the things that we know really well about Salesforce user adoption from doing that research is you can build the best system in the world, but if your organization isn't ready to use it, it won't be used the right way, adoption will be poor, and then the system will become tainted by that. So when we're thinking about AI readiness, first evaluate your entire organization for that. And by organization, I mean your people, your processes, and your technology. You can't just insert AI into Salesforce and it's going to work. And so these 5 critical things that you see here in terms of AI readiness, we really want you to think about as you begin to think about how you can make sure data hygiene is at the top of your list and something you pervasively chase. So you're thinking about it constantly. Of course, we want to think about risk, privacy, and governance. Governance is critical for AI readiness. For the first time ever, we have 4 different generations in the workforce at the same time, and they're all going to think about the risk of AI a little bit differently. So make sure as you're evaluating your organization and whether or not they're ready for AI, that's something we want you to think about. And in the center there, you see that IT environment and security. And we really want you to think about whatever types of process and policy your organization has in place when it comes to the use of AI. If you have a distributed workforce, have you talked to them about what types of systems that they're using that are also on your IP address? How is your data being accessed? Do you have multi-factor authentication? Are you finding different ways for people to access Salesforce, whether it's through mobile or it's through their desktop? So think about that IT environment and look at it through a lens of AI readiness. We're going to move to the next slide because while AI readiness is something that you need to think about, the strategy is what's going to drive it. Adam already foreshadowed this at the beginning, but I really wanted to make sure that you take away from this piece of the presentation, your AI strategy is only as good as your data strategy. If you want to start using what Salesforce is capable of giving you with AI, and trust me, you do, because productivity for your sales and marketing and service teams are going to absolutely accelerate whenever you've got AI implemented and you can learn more, better, faster, so you can do the things that you actually want to do. But you can't get there if you don't have a good data strategy. So if you're listening right now and you're from a small organization and you're scratching your head saying, how in the world is my small company going to come up with a data strategy? We want you to just start thinking about your other strategies. So if you don't have a data lake, a data warehouse, and these words are actually sounding foreign to you, that is perfectly fine. Start where you are. So think about what that data strategy is. Where do you keep the data? Who is the person who's in charge of the data? If you've got a small sales team, is it the sales team that's making sure it's there? Do you have a data lead source that you're pulling from? Some type of third-party application that is feeding and sourcing and making sure your data is inside of there? You need to outline and identify where that's coming from, and you'll start to be able to put a data strategy together. If you're a larger mid-commercial, mid-market company or an enterprise company, you probably do have a data strategy that's outlined, but really look at it with intense eyes to say, is this written for us to take advantage of AI? So take the time to dig through there and understand what your data strategy is and how that's going to inform your AI strategy, because you need to have them both. And I will tell you the same thing I tell myself all the time, and that is progress before perfection. Don't feel so overwhelmed by the concept of AI and taking advantage of it and clean data when we all know that there is a little bit of dirty data hanging out underneath there. That is perfectly fine. Begin where you are and make progress on it as you move through. We'll move to the next slide now so that I can tell you a little bit more about AI reskilling. And this is an absolute critical component. So what I found in my Salesforce user adoption research was a lot of the times people felt overwhelmed when they were trying to use and maybe adopt Salesforce because they weren't given the new skills that they needed beyond an initial training. So these 5 components, I think, are really critical for you to remember right now when you're thinking about adult learners. This came out of a special edition of the Harvard Business Review, where they said AI reskilling is a strategic imperative. That's not just something you can do in one siloed department in your organization. It's something that has to fall into your corporate strategy. Reskilling is the important responsibility of every leader and manager. And those of you that have been around Salesforce for a long time, like Calvin and I have, know that when Salesforce rolled out really big changes, there are some good stories that came out of that, like when Chatter came out and Michael Dell was the #1 user of Chatter. Those leaders and managers better get involved and not just say, hey, look, AI is something that everybody has to figure out themselves. Make it part of your everyday lexicon. How are we going to work AI in? It's a change management initiative, so please treat it as such. Make sure it's not something that gets redlined out. Think about how you're going to communicate it, how you'll train people on it, what the user acceptance testing is going to look like. So think of it the same way you think about any other change management initiative. And remember that employees really want to reskill. They want to get better at their job and do things better, faster when it makes sense for them. And finally, I just want you to know reskilling is something that is going to take some time. It's going to take an important approach from entire organization. We'll move to the next slide, because now that you are thinking about what AI is like, I wanted to just show you, I did a 3-second search on the university research system, and I found all the way back in 2004, Computer Weekly was saying, clean data means clean profit. So you get big cost savings if you have clean data. This is critical. I'm so glad you've decided to join us today so you can learn about how to get cleaner data. And then as we get into a little bit more recent time, you can see data cleaning will give you better data analytics and you can make better decisions. So I think at this point, you're probably convinced having clean data is going to help you use AI better in your Salesforce instance. So we'll move to the next slide. And now I think that you're going to be really excited to say, all right, cool. Calvin, I don't want to sit down at a dirty table. Who wants to start eating a beautiful meal at a dirty table like this picture is showing us? I want to sit down at a beautiful, clean, fresh table. And by table, I think we all know, Calvin, I am talking about your Salesforce instance and the data that's inside of there. Really quickly before I hand it off to you, Gartner in 2021 said every year, poor data quality costs organizations almost $13 million, which is wild. That is an insane number. Of course, that's an average that comes across multiple organizations, but just think about what that's doing to your organization. And we know that if you don't have a good approach, you're going to have bad results. So let's shift off of this slide, because I know right now you're saying, Shannon, hey, guess what? You have me so convinced. It's time for us to learn a little bit more about how to get cleaner data in our Salesforce instance. Let's move to the next slide.
All righty.
Calvin, I am so excited to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. So this is just a slide that I pulled off from Salesforce's marketing materials, right? I don't work for Salesforce anymore. I used to, but this is kind of shows an overview of the importance of your data at its central core, right? We have two new, relatively new Salesforce products. We have Data Cloud and Einstein, and they all interface with what is essentially the Salesforce CRM, aka your data. You can see the center of importance of it because you can see that it runs a lot of applications and integrations runs off of CRM. It is still the single de facto source of truth. Even though Data Cloud has real-time data ingestion, it brings in the single view of the customer. At the end of the day, unless it has good data, unless it has reliable data, unless it has data that you can trust, both Einstein and Data Cloud are not going to be as useful, or at least they're not going to be able to run to the fullest of their capabilities. I did a deep dive into Data Cloud and understanding what it does exactly and how it handles bad data. And the answer is it does have a little bit of data deduplication as well as data handling practices. Data Cloud does give you a bit of ability to do reconciliation rules, as well as the ability for you to be able to find any matching profiles that might be the same user and the same person. But really, where the limitations of Data Cloud might be coming in is that they don't give you the ability for you to implement the business logic that you might have when dealing with duplicate data. It doesn't give you the ability for you to choose which record is the one to keep when a dedupe happens, nor does it give you the ability for you to really, in a fine-grained way, to be able to control how you merge in those two records. Additionally, Einstein also, of course, relies on the data being stored inside of your CRM, whether it is your sales data or your service data, and of course, your marketing and commerce data. Unless it has a good set of data points, data points that you trust, data points that are free of duplicates, and I'll show you later on how you can structure those data points. Unless it has everything set up for it, those chatbots might not work properly, or those sales predictions might overpredict or underpredict. And even in some cases, you might be reaching out to the same user within Marketing Cloud or same customer within the Marketing Cloud multiple times simply because there's duplicates that haven't been handled, right? Clean data really starts with you, and it will help you bring out the full potential of AI when you have clean data, leading to a more effective marketing strategy, increased sales, as well as our overall greater customer satisfaction when it comes to service. Okay, here's a quick slide showing the consequences of poor data. I call this the 110-100 slide, and that really stems from the cost of what it costs to be able to deal with bad data, right? This is all being pulled in from a blog post I found, which actually pulled in from the Harvard Business Review. But it basically outlines the fact that, the cost of prevention is $1 or even sometimes cents of a dollar. Preventing bad data from even going into your system is paramount, right? Obviously, that's not always true. And I'll show you some free solutions that you can actually implement with actually preventing bad data from even flowing into your system. More often than not, the data will become a point where it's inside of the database, it's being used by your reports, it's being looked at by sales managers, territory managers, marketers, even service personnel, where the cost of that bad data that has gone into your system has gone from $1 to $10. It's magnified by a tenfold. And the correction cost is estimated to be about $10, right? And a lot of that correction cost is, understanding where that data is coming from, understanding where it's being used, and understanding where it can actually be corrected and remediated. And that's why that correction cost is now 10x the cost of prevention. And finally, the biggest cost of it all, failure, right? What is failure exactly? Well, it's wasted time. How often have you followed up on a lead that has been followed by a previous sales rep simply because there's been a duplicate been inserted into the system? Ben is the same person as Benjamin, but because it has been put into the system as a duplicate, you might have two sales leads or even two service personnel following the same exact user. That's wasted time. And it's been estimated that there's about 30% of time is being lost in CRM, compounded with a bunch of inefficiencies, routing, reporting, and general, leading on to a overall lack of trust. Increased costs. It's also estimated that 27% of company revenue is lost due to poor quality data. data that you can't trust, data that is leading to wasted time, inefficiencies, all those above. And as Shannon alluded to earlier, artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence is only as good as the underlying data that it's reporting on. It's not a magic tool, even though we wish it is. You want to make sure that your data is structured properly. You want to make sure that it's accurate so that you can trust it, such that it's not going to cause you problems down the line, such that this whole preventative cost is only nipped in the bud at a single dollar, and it doesn't balloon over into 100 times into becoming a $100 failure cost. So what exactly is bad data, right? We talk about bad data all the time throughout this entire presentation. Well, these are some examples of what bad data might be. How many times have you named the field 1, field 2, field 3? I'm a developer, I've made all of those mistakes. And more often than not, it comes from being able to do something quickly, right? But the issue is that the end user, the admin, or even the end user of Salesforce might not necessarily know the difference between field 1, field 2, and field 3. And to be able to solve that is you want to start off with descriptive names, a name such as customer lifetime value or reputational score, right? That is something that is actionable. That is something that you might be able to, that is very easily to be able to understand, and it will be able to help you prevent any bad data from being inserted into the system in the first place. To follow up upon that, on top of that, inconsistent formatting, right? Camel case versus lower first case. Consistent formatting is hard to enforce, and it is oftentimes very difficult to know what's wrong until something has happened already. And the answer to that is to keep your fields consistent and your types consistent as well. Maybe put in a bit of field validation, a bit of enforcement into making sure that the data that's being inserted into your database is indeed clean, is that it does indeed match the other points of data within your Salesforce system, such that the field formatting, the values, and the types are all consistent. Next, incomplete fields. How often do you see fields inside of Salesforce missing, or fields that are just incompletely filled? Well, you solve that by making sure that your objects have a level of consistency. Are the fields consistently filled out every single time? Another big one, inaccurate data, right? Whether it is stale, whether it is completely just wrong, whether your system lacks the ability for it to be your data to be verified, right? Those are all things that can contribute to bad data. And the answer to that is that you want to ensure data accuracy and data updatedness. Next, bad data is wrong access. In a lot of cases, this is also a security issue too, right? Wrong access meaning the wrong users have access to the right data, right? The issue still is that wrong access is a security loophole. You want to make sure that your access is controlled. You want to make sure that users who should not have access to that data set do not have access to it. And you want to do consistent and constant reporting to make sure that the access is controlled and that sharing is preserved, whether it is a user that is higher in the account hierarchy, or even a user that isn't a part of a certain sales territory. You're going to make sure that your access is controlled so that the right users have access to the right records at the right time. Okay, so these are kind of to drill down deeper, these are kind of the 4 qualities of what comprise of what data quality is. The first one, intrinsic quality. Intrinsic quality means that your data is accurate, that it is valid, meaning that it's always going to be correct, nothing is misspelled, and that even addresses are indeed going to send to the correct mailbox. And then yet, intrinsic quality also means that it's reliable, right? Every single time you access that data, it's correct, that it is updated, such that it is reliable for you to be able to use. Next one, contextual quality. Relevance, right? That means it's also timeliness and complete as well, right? Contextual quality contributes to your precision. It contributes to the ability for you to see very granular data, such that it is ready for you to use and it's ready for you to be able to do reporting on. Are your sales numbers correct? Are your customer satisfaction, is that correct? Are your leads actually indeed separated such that it is granular, so that one lead set from one trade show doesn't get crossed into another one? Is it precise? Is it timeliness? It's a bunch of those things. Contextual quality is a sum of all those things. And you're going to want to make sure that you keep that up when you go through your database and your cleaning operations. Okay, the next point being representational quality. And representational quality is the fact of completeness, right? Is the data complete? Is it unique? And is it indeed correct? Obviously, there's a bit of overlap between representational quality as well as contextual quality, but you want to keep all these points in mind as you go out and clean out your database, ensuring that your data is clean, accurate, reportable, and that everything is represented correctly. And then finally, accessibility quality, right? That means is it accessible, right? Is it accessible to the correct users? Are those objects provisioned to the correct user profiles? And that it all boils down to security in the end, right? You don't want the wrong user to be using the wrong data, and that you want to make sure that there's no bad actors inside of your security systems and your Salesforce instance. Another big point is deduplication, right? And this is how you can do it with Salesforce, is that Salesforce already gives you a set of duplicate rules. Data Cloud, of course, also gives you a bit of remediation rules where you can actually clean and dedupe some of the data that might reside inside of your CRM system. And Salesforce out of the box gives you a couple of basic rules that allow you to do deduplication, detection, and prevention, right? Whether it's in the form of matching rules, duplicate rules, validation rules, or even jobs that you might be able to build out as a admin, you can leverage Salesforce's duplicate rules to be able to help you remediate any duplicates that might be coming into your system. However, there are limitations, right? Everything free always has a catch point where, out of the box, it might not necessarily have the complete set of matching algorithms. There's, I've used the dedupe tool of Salesforce before, and you realize quickly that there's no ability for you to be able to do a mass merge, right? There's no ability for you to be able to say, hey, all these are indeed matches. I just want to merge them all. It doesn't give you the ability for you to do that. Additionally, Salesforce, of course, only supports Salesforce standard objects. So there's no support for custom objects. And also, there's no ability for you to do a cross-object deduplication. For example, if you wanted to look for any leads that might otherwise exist inside of your contact object, can't do that with Salesforce, right? It has its own limitations, even though it's free. So, I'll show you later on in this demo how you can actually remediate that with the tool that we give you. And finally, filling into the blanks. Sorry for the corny stock photo. I think it is really a good representation of holes inside of your data, even though our data sets are no longer ones and zeros, but you get the point. Right, so filling in the blanks, right? What else might be available to you inside of the marketplace and helping you fill in the blanks that might otherwise exist inside of your Salesforce system? First one, field usage. Salesforce gives you out of the box the Salesforce Optimizer tool. That's just inside of setup. And you can use the Salesforce Optimizer to see the records usage. You can use the optimizer to understand who has access to which records and what permissions and profiles are related to those records. But more importantly, you can also use Salesforce Optimizer to see how often are your fields being actually utilized. Right, Salesforce Optimizer comes out of the box. It's just inside of the setup menu, and any admin can actually pick that up and use it. Additionally, there's a bunch of ETL tools on the market. I'm not going to cover that in the context of this conversation, but just to give you a quick overview, there's obviously MuleSoft, Informatica, etc. There are also a bunch of ETL tools that you can actually leverage directly from your Salesforce instance via its APIs. And as a matter of fact, if you really draw the line, depending on how you draw the line, the Salesforce Data Loader is actually an ETL tool as well. And then finally, you can also do a bit of data enrichment in your utilities. There are a bunch of data enrichment utilities available in the market as well. It comes in the form of ZoomInfo, right? ZoomInfo gives you the ability for you to take a look at all the records inside of your system. It'll correlate it against the database that it might have that will be able to help you enrich any missing information that might otherwise not exist inside of Salesforce. All right, there are a bunch of tools out there. There's ZoomInfo, there's DNB, there's Sales Intel, as well as 6 Sense and others as well. And then finally, if you want to look at incomplete records that might exist inside of Salesforce, you can utilize Salesforce reports to look at any records that have been blank or empty fields. You can also use Salesforce reports to report on inconsistent formatting, as well as records that are just missing some key pieces of information, right? These are all tools that are available to you. But the problem is that they're scattered, right? You're going to have to swivel chair between all of these integrations, all of these tools to be able to give you a full single view of your data inside of Salesforce. And a lot of times that might lead to, again, holes in your data or even some key pieces of information being missed out of your viewpoints. So that's why we at Data Groomer make a tool that encompasses all of these issues. We make a tool that gives you the ability for you to quickly report on fields that might be missing, report on fields or on records that have incomplete information, as well as we make a tool that gives you the ability for you to do a bit of verification, right? Verifying whether that data is indeed correct, whether those emails are going to send, and even whether those phone numbers are going to dial. Additionally, we have a tool that handles, that is a direct replacement of Salesforce Data Loader. We make a tool that gives you the ability for you to bring in large data sets from a CSV file or really any other cloud-based provider or a third-party system. We give you the ability for you to import those files directly into Salesforce, all without introducing any duplicates. Right. On top of that, our tool is fully compliant with the latest industry standards, inclusive of SOC 2 Type 2, as well as HIPAA compliance. We have all those certifications. And to shore that up, we also give you the ability for you to do auditing, right? Understanding what has happened inside of your database, what has happened inside of scheduled jobs. And if necessary, you can also revert and remediate any actions that you might have taken inadvertently. So with all that talking, I'm just going to bring it over to a demo. I'm going to switch my screen sharing real quick. All right, and this is Data Groomer. And Data Groomer, again, is an all-encompassing utility that shows you the health of your data within Salesforce. Right now, we're looking at the default dashboard that shows a quick summary of duplicates within your Salesforce instance, and that you can be able to act upon any data quality issues that might exist. On the right, we just actually released this new utility that gives you the ability for you to create models that look for the completeness as well as consistency within your data sets. Right now, we're looking at one that looks for country format consistency, and determines whether that data is completely filled out or not. Additionally, we give you the ability for you to do timeliness as well. So that means whether any leads inside of your lead object are stale, you can detect that with your data quality models. But the main draw of our utility, I have to say, is actually within our trimmer utility that gives you the ability for you to detect duplicates. Right now, I have a bunch of duplicates being detected inside of a bunch of objects. I've created a data set, and a data set is simply a subset of data within your object. And this data set we're calling Leads in Canada, which is looking at leads that have been coming in from your Canadian leads. Right here is our duplicates view, where you can view these records side by side. Data Groomer already gives you the ability for you to see any mismatch of information between these two lead records. And the great thing about this is that it shows you actually a live preview of what's going to happen after this dedo operation is going to occur. You can see that this lead record has been outlined as the master record, which means that it's the record that's being kept. And this one is the non-surviving record. And we also give you the ability for you to create your own rules on choosing which record is the master, as well as which record is going to be the non-surviving record. And of course, with any data set, with any type of data being stored inside a data set, you're going to want to make sure that no data is being lost when a merge occurs. So that's why we give you a set of tools that give you the ability for you to control how that data is being preserved between these two records. And additionally, if this is not enough for you to be able to make a decision, we give you the ability for you to utilize this AI utility. This is actually really new, that detects whether these two records are indeed duplicates or not, right? And the way that this AI model works is that it's being hosted inside of a third-party system that detects whether these are duplicates or not, right? And indeed, it actually shows you why it believes that these two records are not duplicates. And the reasoning, despite the full names being the same, it's detected that, hey, the company is different, right? The addresses are different. Even the phone numbers and emails are completely different. And, back to the whole transformation into AI, we give you the ability for you to detect duplicates, as well as be able to help you create actionable insights on these any duplicate records that might be detected within Salesforce, right? Moving forward, we also give you the ability for you to do mass transformations as well, right? We talked about whether your data is consistent, whether it is indeed accurate, right? Brusher gives you the ability for you to do that. So inside of these Brusher data set views, again, we have a overview of your lead records, but in this case, it's measuring for things that are looking for, completeness, right? Are these records complete? Are these records completely filled out? We're also looking for things like timeliness in this column right here. And additionally, if I chose to verify all these records, you would be able to see whether these address records, whether these email records are indeed, accurate or not. And you can drill down deeper by looking at, only valid addresses. You can drill down deeper into only looking for valid phone numbers, as well as valid emails. And you can see that we give you the ability for you to see any suggestions on remediating any of these records. And in this case, of course, in this live demo, there are no records that are found for whether they're invalid or not, only because my data is great. But if we jump into the account records, you can actually see that, we will show you some warnings that are invalid, right? Whether these billing addresses are valid or invalid, we can show you the ability for you to do that, right? You can see that we have a bit of suggestions on actually how to remediate this, right? So you can see that inside of this Apple account, I've only entered in the street number as well as the city, but our system has actually been able to do a bit of validation as well as enrichment as well, right? It's taken the contextual information that it is indeed a street located inside of a city, and it's enriched the state as well as the postal code information directly within the Salesforce instance, right? And if you choose to do so, hit replace, it'll bring everything that's being stored and being analyzed inside a data groomer, and it'll bring that into Salesforce for you. And of course, with any actions inside a data groomer, you can always replace or ignore entirely. And then finally, our third big utility is Importer, right? Importer gives you the ability for you to bring in records from CSV files. We use this extensively because we go to trade shows a lot. And a lot of times trade shows, all you get from a trade show is a CSV file. And the ability for you to be able to import those CSVs directly back into Salesforce is a huge time saver, as well as a huge boost in accuracy for our data being brought in as leads, right? You can see that Data Groomer gives you the analysis/summary of what records match and what records do not match, right? Whether someone has stopped by my booth in the past, it'll show as a match record. And instead of creating a duplicate that the Salesforce data loader might otherwise create, we actually are just doing an update, right? It'll tell you, hey, this is what the information that's being stored inside of Salesforce. This is the information that's being pulled in from your CSV file. And based on that, you can actually even modify some of these informations directly from this inline view editor as well. And if you chose to actually preserve just the information from this file within Salesforce without considering the information being brought in from that CSV file, uncheck this and your data inside of Salesforce will be left alone, right? And based on that, you can also take mass actions, right? Mass actions, whether it is a mass import, so it'll bring in all the unmatched records from the CSV file from your CSV file directly into Salesforce. That's what mass actions will do. Mass updates will let you update data that's being stored inside of that CSV file, merge it in with what's happening inside of Salesforce. That's what mass update will be able to do. And then third is mass transform. So in this case of this record group right here, you can see that I've actually applied a transformation rule that unifies the formatting being stored inside of this business phone number, right? Inside of my Salesforce instance, I don't want any parens, I don't want any dashes or spaces. That's why a transform rule has been executed on this business phone. And you can indeed see that the phone number has been transformed into the one that matches the consistency inside of my Salesforce instance. And then finally, the fourth action that you can also do is do verifications, right? You want to make sure that your leads are indeed correct, that you're not inserting any bad data inside of Salesforce. You can do a mass verification on all records being stored inside of this CSV file. And you can do that all before bringing it back into Salesforce. And if that's still not enough for you, you can also do a export, which will give you the ability for you to export the CSV file, send it over to different departments, send it over for additional analysis. You can use the export functionality to inline edit any of these records within a familiar interface such as Excel and bring that into Salesforce. Again, with Importer, such that you don't reintroduce any duplicates. We will handle all the matching for you. We will handle all the update for you. Rest assured, it's a much better utility for you to use, and it'll lead to better user experience as well as higher productivity within your Salesforce day-to-day operations. And finally, if you chose to do so, you can also do a mass delete as well. I obviously am not going to delete any of my demo data, but just know that if you click on this, it'll be able to help you mass delete any matched Salesforce records, such that you don't have to delete them individually, and gives you a lot more productivity. And finally, to tie it all together, we also give you the ability for you to audit on what's been happening inside of your Salesforce instance in the context of Data Groomer. So you can use Log Browser to see exactly what's been happening. You can see that we have some tag events that have been happening inside of our contact records. You can see that we have a bit of CSV file uploading, as well as analysis events that have occurred inside of accounts. And if you wanted to revert any of these actions, right, any of these tagging actions, you can do so by, pushing this revert button and reverting anything that has been happening inside of Data Groomer that has occurred inside of Salesforce. Again, we have a recycle bin functionality that'll bring back any deleted records, dedupe data, and you can revert that back from Salesforce directly inside of the Data Groomer interface. Now, that's a quick overview of Data Groomer. If you want a deeper dive, be more than happy to help you. Just reach out to us through our support teams, and we will give you a more comprehensive deep dive. But I'm going to reshare my screen back into the presentation. And we're going to talk about moving forward, right? In addition to the tools that I gave you, as well as what we make as a company, moving forward, right? The best way to remediate any bad data inside of your system is to start with prevention, right? We're back to that little pyramid slide where we talked about how bad data gets magnified every single step of the way. You want to start at the single dollar sign, right? Instead of ballooning to multiple dollars, you want to go with the single dollar. And you do that by preventing that bad data as it is being inserted into Salesforce. And you do that by first enforcing mandatory fields, right? Making sure that the data that's being inserted by your sales reps, your case representatives, that the data is indeed clean before it actually goes into the system. And you do that by mandatory fields. You do that by validation rules. Does it match up? Does it look right? Validation rules can help you prevent any bad data from being inserted into Salesforce. Additionally, pick lists, right? No brainer, but I see this used all the time, right? Or lack thereof. Text boxes are kind of the bane of existence for a lot of admins, right? Because they are free form. There's absolutely no consistency with how you fill out a text form. And the answer to that is a pick list, values that you can define as an admin, right? Values that are reportable, that are consistent, and that the user has a limited set of options that they can actually choose with the pick list. That's why pick lists are great, and pick lists are super reportable, whether it's reports and dashboards or even within Einstein AI. A pick list will be a lot useful than a free text transform field. Additionally, to help your users be more productive, a customized page layout might be useful, right? Customized page layouts when combined with record types will certainly be able to help you be a lot more productive. Whether you are a nonprofit, whether you are a case operator, a customized page layout will be super useful in making sure that your data is going to be inserted correctly every single time. And to tie it all together, automation, right? This is whether it's in the form of flows, whether it's in the form of triggers, or other utilities that might exist inside of Salesforce. You want to use automation to be able to auto-populate fields, as well as combining it with validation rules to help you ensure that the data being inserted into Salesforce is indeed correct. Additionally, permissions, right? Permissions are super useful, super important in making sure that your data is not being modified by the incorrect users, right? We've seen it in the past, a lot of Salesforce customers oftentimes might buy a bunch of admin licenses because a sales director from a certain region feels like they should be able to modify all permissions and see all records. Shouldn't be the case, right? You want to make sure that your permissions are set up correctly such that no users that should not be accessing data are restricted to a certain scope, right? You want to make sure that users are only able to view and modify data that they're allowed to do, and you do that by permissions and by roles. Additionally, as an admin, right, data import, right? I showed you the usage of importer, which will give you the ability for you to import data without introducing any duplicates. But additionally, you want to make sure that your data import protocols are structured correctly, right? I've seen a lot of customers with integrations that might insert duplicate data. A lot of integrations that might not respect the field formatting that you've worked really hard to set up within your Salesforce validation rules and mandatory fields. You want to make sure that your data import protocols are structured correctly. Those APIs are indeed bringing in the right data, and that they are only bringing in the data that you actually need. So data import protocols are super useful in making sure the data that is coming into your Salesforce is indeed clean. And then finally, this is almost a no-brainer, but it takes the most amount of time. And it all starts from the individual user, right? The users of Salesforce, your case reps, your marketers, your sales reps, right? You want to make sure that they follow data entry training, that they understand what each of those pick lists might mean, why there are validation rules that might exist inside of Salesforce, because at the end of the day, good data starts with the individual user, the user that is bringing it in. So you're going to want to make sure that your users are undergoing data entry training throughout your quarterly cycle. Any new users that you might be onboarding, you're going to want to make sure that they follow the best practices that you've outlined inside of your Salesforce instance, such that your data is free of duplicates, such that it is free of any issues, and that you can trust it moving forward, and along with your adoption of AI. Now, with that, I'd like to open up the floor to any questions